When I got asked to do this show, I first thought about doing something in honor of Father's Day, but my dad's rage from his undiagnosed PTSD from Vietnam. Then I thought, nah, let's do one about farting. I met Mike and John our freshman year of college. We were all in the same creative writing program. They were best friends from high school, and they had the same look. Pajama pants, long tangled hair, moon boots. Where John was a Nordic Viking with bright blue eyes and blonde hair, Mike was his foil with dark hair and eyes and a beguiling unibrow. John was largely silent, and Mike never stopped talking. He and I immediately glommed onto each other, and we'd spend our walks to and from the dorms, one-upping each other with crazy things we'd done. One story he told was about he'd like a girl. When he'd finally gotten the guts to ask her out, she turned him down. He was heartbroken, but instead of wallowing in despair, he plotted his revenge. He ran into her at a party where she was seated on the floor along a wall talking to some friends. Mike walked up to her, turned around, farted directly in her face, then walked away. The gleam in his eye as he told me this story was a red flashing sign of foreshadowing, one that I completely missed. We stayed friends through freshman and sophomore years, sitting next to each other so we could whisper critique our classmates' short stories in class, then loudly critique them on the walk home. Mike's writing was eccentric and bold, and mine hasn't changed much in 25 years. I loved his quirkiness and the excitement in which he talked and wrote. Unfortunately, my friendship love did not translate into a sexy, sexy love. While I also had a unique look, long stringy hair, novelty tees, oversized bell-bottom jeans, held up with a string from one of my childhood dresses, and Birkenstocks, I was always drawn to the grunge version of the football quarterback. But it was cool. Mike's and my platonic feelings were mutual, right? At the end of sophomore year, I was having a hard time getting into a writing class, and I was freaking out. Mike took me to the office of the professor who taught the class. He, Mike, and John had built some sort of mentor-mentee friendship that involved the guys going over to his house for dinner and philosophy. After I told Professor Mulhaney my plight and begged to be added to his class, he leaned back into his chair and nodded his head. "Tell you what," he said, "I'll put you in my class if you have sex with this guy." This guy, of course, was Mike, standing about a foot away from me. Mike didn't seem to have the slightest bit of embarrassment in this proposition. In fact, he looked delighted. No? I responded eloquently. Professor Mulhaney nodded again. "Okay, then you go and find someone to have sex with him. Someone cute. Can you do that?" Looking back, of course, I marvel at the careless boldness men of authority had before social media and Me Too. At the time, though, all I could think about was getting into the class without having sex with Mike. "Sure," I shrugged. "I can't promise anything, but I'll definitely try." With a handshake deal, I was in the class. That summer I stayed down at school, and Mike came to visit me in July. He brought me a TJ Hooker magnet, and we went out to dinner. We had updated each other on all the ridiculousness we had witnessed since we last saw each other, and schemed about the trouble we'd get into junior year. Mike and I had taken an improv class together the semester before, and hooked, I had joined an improv team that performed weekly at the Union. He decided writing was more his thing. We were excited about what the year would hold. When school started, I realized Professor Mulhaney had either been joking or had forgotten about our little arrangement because he never brought it up again. Thank God. I was able to get through the class without becoming a prostitute or a madam. Everything was going great until Mike came over one night to hang out. I was living in the basement of a house, and we watched a little romantic movie called Ed Wood on my bed. After the movie ended, he said he had a question. "What would I do if he kissed me?" "Push you away," came my gentle answer. Mike shrugged, and we left things that night on good terms. Or so I thought. A couple weeks later, John told me he had to talk to me about something after class. I followed him out of the room to an empty stairwell. Mike and I were talking, he said, and we wanted to know, how often do you beat off to us? For a guy of few words, he sure packed a wallop when he spoke. This definitely has made the top 5 moments I wish I could go back to and answer with intelligent wit. Girls don't beat off. And even if we did, mister, it certainly we wouldn't be to you two moon-booted dirtbags. Instead, I responded with, then turned around red-faced and walked out of the building. Months later, I realized he had pre-planned the moment with Mike, who was most certainly listening from the bottom of the stairwell. A few weeks after that, I was making pizzas at the restaurant I worked at, and a server walked into the kitchen, kind of stood there, and then stood static with confusion. It seems there were 2 guys with long, stringy hair and pajama pants at her table, who were trying to bribe her into telling me how hot she found them. That was the end of my friendship with Mike. While he didn't go so far as farting on me, coming to my job to harass me had reached a similar threshold of humiliation. Mike came back into my life a few years ago as a name on the list of storytellers performing at a friend's monthly event. I Googled him, of course. While I continued the improv path and spent my 20s in a dim theater getting paid in laughs and hangovers, Mike traveled the world for years, returning to write several novels and books of essays and poems. He had received some critical acclaim, which didn't surprise me. One of his press photos has him wearing a top hat, which also doesn't surprise me. As I am a woman of the 90s, I friended him on Facebook, then weaseled him via Messenger into apologizing to me for the ridiculousness he caused. I'd like to think if we ran into each other again, we'd sit down and catch each other up on 20 years of adventures. I would just have to make sure I never let him turn his back to me. Thank you.